Adult Services Scrutiny Panel today. Just to let you know that the meeting is not being live streamed, but it's being recorded and it will be published online following this meeting. For people in the office, to make certain you raise your hand if you want to speak out of the office. And those that are in here, if they can make certain your mics are off if you're doing a laptop. Liz will monitor to make certain I don't miss anybody. We're going to start the meeting now, or the meeting's being recorded now, isn't it, Liz? Can I also just welcome our new panel member, Mark Tribe. Hello, Mark. Thank you for attending.
Afternoon, thank you for the welcome. Thank you.
Okie dokie. Right, we'll go on to the first item then. Apologies for absence, Liz.
We've received apologies from Councillor Erica Kirshner, Louise Gibbard, from Officers Amy Hawkins and Helen St John, Chair. Okie
dokie. Hopefully Helen and Amy will join us at a time convenient to them. Disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Are there any? None? Prohibition of the...
My daughter works for social services.
Thank you, Chris. Liz will make you certain you get the information to fill out the form. Okay. Prohibition of whipped votes and declaration of party whips, if anyone hasn't to raise anything. Item 4, previous minutes, one set from June the 28th. Okay, we'll go through the minutes then. Page 1, page 2, and page 3. Can I have a vote that they were true record? Thank you, Tony. Seconded by Chris. Lovely, thank you. Public question time, Liz. No questions? Oh God, we'll be home now before we turn around. Item 6 is the Wales audit report, Together We Can. Who's taking the lead on this? Hayley.
Yeah, so my name's Hayley Gwilym. I'm Cabinet Member for Community Support. This item actually is cross-cutting, so it covers both myself and my colleague Alison Pugh's portfolios. And the report is in response to Audit Wales' published report, Together We Can, Community Resilience and Self-Reliance. And I think it's very important to note that this is moving from doing to very much about enabling and influencing. And Swansea Council, the local authority, has committed to doing that already, and it's something that our tackling poverty team, adult services, are very much driving forward and have been for some time. I think it's also important to note that we're looking at communities and enabling communities, and part of what was mentioned in the report is around making grant giving much easier, which is something that will follow on today's session. Volunteering strategy, which I know that has been worked upon, and identifying council leaders, which is actually what we as councillors are very much part of and play a pivotal role, but also our local area coordinators team who very much work in that way. And we have community involvement and engagement officers that are doing fantastic work already in our communities. And it talks as well about identifying what is already existing in our communities and what is working well. And that mapping exercise is something that is commencing. And councillor champions as well. I think we do have council champions who use their skills and attributes and experience for a really good purpose in driving that work forward as well. I don't know if there's anything my colleague Alison wants to come in on before we hand over to the officers.
Yeah, thanks very much. You know, we welcomed this report, and there's many positives from it, and I think we're very fortunate here in Swansea that you know, we have got a poverty team. A lot of local authorities haven't got the same setup as we've got. We've got that investment, and we very much work together as a team within the service. You know, we've spent a long time, we've been working towards the strategy since 2017, and you know, the officers have led on, we've got internal forums, external forums for poverty. Everybody sees it very much as a team. You know, the departments help each other. You know, Ailey mentioned the engagement teams and the local area coordinators. Everybody wraps around the employability. And Anthony sits within and manages the poverty there, but they all work together, because we know that we can't achieve things if we don't, you know. And so I pay credit to all the work that has gone into this, and I do think we are quite, you know, we are in hard times. We've got a huge financial crisis. We've come out of COVID. The resilience isn't there in the communities. It's taken a long time to build back up, to get people to be confident again, and you know, and work together. But what I will say is, you know, and you'll see, you know, with the reports and the following one as well, you know, that we have got excellent relationships with our partners, with our third sector, with our health boards, you know, because you can't do it alone. You know, it is huge. So I would like to, yeah, just thank all the staff really, because they've worked really hard to get us to where we are. I'm really proud of them.
Thank you, Amy. Hand over now to Lee. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors, for the kind words as well. And afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Lee Cambouli. I'm the Principal Officer for Tackling Poverty. So I'll just take you quickly through the report that accompanies this. So a little bit of background, as Hayley mentioned, the background of this Audit Wales report. It's part of a series of reviews that were conducted by Audit Wales over the last 2 years or so, looking at various aspects of alleviating and tackling poverty. This particular report, which was published in January, focuses on the importance of community resilience and self-reliance, and the increasing need of communities to become much more resilient in the face of, you know, sort of emergencies and civil contingencies and things like that. So there is definitely a role for local authorities to play in that, and in terms of, as we said, you know, enabling and supporting communities to grow that self-reliance. And the report basically highlights a lot of the findings from reviews, interviews, various investigations with local authorities across Wales, evidence from other places as well. So the report, I'll just quickly walk you through the report, provides that context and that little bit of background about what the Audit Wales review has found. A lot of the sort of issues that were emerging from the report really built on things that were experienced during the COVID pandemic, in response to the cost of living crisis, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of good evidence there about where we are at the minute. But what the report really encourages is for us to look at the barriers, look at the challenges, look at the local issues that are there, and for each local authority to do its own sort of self-evaluation, so that we can come up with a very measured and appropriate response for the needs of our local communities. So the report takes you through the findings, highlights some of the elements of the report in a little bit more of an overview, but fundamentally it kind of really focuses on that there are good examples of good practice out there. There are opportunities for us to build on the good work that is already being done, and to work you know, on the footprint that we've got in our local communities to continue to grow and evolve that in terms of things like we said, local area coordination and things like that. So the recommendations of the report, it's pretty straightforward actually. Recommendation 1 just basically says we recommend that local authorities undertake a self-evaluation. They provide a tool within the report for us to do that, and what we've done as a group through the 2 committees that kind of oversee this work, the Enabling Communities Group and the Swansea Council Poverty Forum, we've started to pull that research and that internal thinking together. So the evaluation, the second recommendation to say, once you've done that review, you then follow on with action planning and taking action with local communities. So it's a pretty straightforward actual report for us to respond to, but really all of the good stuff is going to come once we've done that evaluation and we've taken that through the right governance in terms of governance and audit committee and others. So really, I suppose the main thing to draw your attention to, as well as the next steps that the report highlights in section 6 that says we're going to do all the usual stuff, engage with cabinet members, engage with the self-evaluation process to make sure everyone's got a say in it, and then publish those findings in terms of action plans to explore really these elements. But really the detail in Annex A of our report just highlights to you the questions that Audit Wales have put to us, and whether we think we've kind of started that journey and started doing that work already, whether those things are in progress, or whether we feel like we've got everything in place. I won't go through every one of them because there's quite a few there, but as you can see, a lot of the analysis that we've done kind of says we've either got some work already underway in these areas, or we feel like there is an opportunity for us to start something fresh and to bring everyone on the journey with us in terms of co-production and working with local communities. So, for example, just to pick a few, the first one there about, do we have clearly defined and agreed definitions of what community resilience and self-reliance means to us? We're saying we haven't started that because we want to properly co-produce that with communities. We want to have sessions with local people, local partners, and just kind of work those definitions up in the right way. So whilst probably different organisations or different parts of the organisation work into different definitions, and as the report says, that's quite common across local authorities in Wales, we're really trying to focus on doing this properly in terms of co-production. So as I said, I won't take you through every one of those, but the next step, if you like, is for us to break down the actions that are going to come out of it. So, for example, with that one I've just given you there, we've already started the action in terms of taking some presentations to our two groups with some ideas of what the definitions could be for community resilience and self-reliance and things like that. And we're going to use that as a framework to then go out and engage with communities and partners. So those actions then will break down into an action plan that our team will be able to coordinate, and we'll report back up then through the governance in terms of those two groups. And that's it for the report, really. The next steps, obviously, from a governance point of view, is we'll take it to audit committee. We'll make sure that it follows the correct procedures, but really we'll then build a lot of these actions into our sort of normal business as usual in terms of the reporting and the work that the teams are doing across the council as well. And that's it, I think, unless anybody has any questions, but thank you very much.
Alan.
Yeah, just thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just a point for clarification on Annex A, that self-evaluation table. I'm looking under the not started. It says yes, not started. That means no. Is it? And no, not started means yes. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you've got it.
Yeah. I think just a point for. I thought it might have been if it was just started, and yes, it started, or no, it hasn't. Just a minor thought. It confused me a little bit there.
Okay.
Yes, I totally understand that. The template we got, it gave us that sort of opportunity to present it in that way. But going forward, what we'll do is we'll turn them into more meaningful actions that we can report on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Jeff Jones, got a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, quite a few really interesting report. I've always, how do you measure poverty, and how do you identify poverty? When you, how do you identify people who are in poverty, and what is poverty? As a starting base and so on. You're actually on about communities being self-reliant. In other words, really, they need to do more for themselves. No, there always has been people who are, shall we say, carrying works out in the community, whether it be, football clubs or whatever and so on. And I'm assuming, one of your targets is to get people, or more people to actually, shall we say, follow this path. But how do you actually control those people then? And how do you actually maintain those people? You really are identifying another workforce. I know you're talking about councillors and perhaps cabinet excuse me, cabinet members being points to resolve problems and so on. But how is this going to actually work? You're identifying somebody here to take on some of the work that local authorities actually had in the past or carried out in the past. I don't know if anybody wants to actually comment on that. I'm always interested in poverty because, you know, there are, I think, definitions. So what definition do you actually work to?
I can see Councillor Pugh's got a hand up as well. I'm happy to come back in initially, though, if unless Alison wants to go first.
Sorry, I think we're having problems with your end in the room because I can only see Hayley and Anthony who've completely frozen. Do you know, I don't know if anybody, whether it's my end or your end, but I think I heard you then, Lee, say that you was going to come in. I only just wanted to say to Jeff, you know, that you're right. Poverty is quite complex out there, isn't it? And you know, and it isn't just associated with somebody who might be on benefits. We have plenty of people that are asset rich and cash poor. We have plenty of people that sort of hide it as well. Do you know what I mean? And we have, you know, but we do know from research and the figures and everything, you know, that if you have a disability, you're far more likely to be in poverty. If you on certain benefits, if you you know, the many reasons out there. And when we know, if you take Revs and Bens, we know the people that get the different what word am I looking for? Grants, different things that we give out. We do sort of know, we have a good capture of people, not everybody. Obviously, we rely on our schools, we rely on social services, but you know, from councillors' point of view, you know, we do come across people in the community. I certainly get quite a few referrals for the food bank. I always then ask the person if I could refer them to welfare rights, so that they can always, and the food bank, refer people to me to refer to welfare rights, so that they can go through their finances, because so often they're not even claiming what they're entitled to claim. Do you know what I mean? You know, all our teams, which I'm sure Lee will go on to say, you know, if you take the employability teams, which are enormous out there, they're all been trained by the poverty team, by the welfare rights team. They all know. They're not welfare rights officers, but they know enough to be able to help people and refer into whatever, you know, take advice on whatever they need. So we very much offer that wraparound support. And Anthony chairs the financial inclusion meeting out there with the third sector, and also with the poverty forum. We work in the prison, you know, and the women's prison as well. You know, we try and pick people up in as many places as possible. And you know, we can't do it all, and that's why we have to use our partners out there. And sometimes a little bit of money goes a long way out there, and that's why we'll go on later to talk about the grants. But it is that sharing of information, really. And councillors all run surgeries. We're all in key positions, really, of supporting our local area coordinators. You know, they get people up and running and into groups and things like that. It is down to everybody, I think, to play a part. So I'm sure Lee will give a more intelligent answer, but that's my two penny.
Thank you, Amy. Lee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. I'm always happy to talk about poverty and the work we're doing, so that's a great opportunity. Just going back to your first point about the definition that we use around poverty, you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to measure things like this, and the definition that we used from our 2017 strategy, which is being refreshed, I'll come on to that in a sec, but I just got the definition up. So it's income below the minimum income standard, and inadequate access to necessary services of good quality, and an adequate opportunity or resource to join in with sort of social, cultural, decision-making activities, those sort of things. So we very much look at it not just in terms of the financial aspects of an individual circumstance, but also in terms of poverty of opportunity and the role that communities and others have to play in what is poverty out there. So we definitely have an opportunity to refresh that, and that's what Anthony and the team are doing now. We're refreshing the Tackling Poverty strategy to just make sure we've got the right definitions, we're using the right measures, we've got all of the things that we need in place, and a big part of that will be talking to communities about what role they have to play in that. Just, you know, I mean, you picked on sort of things like volunteering and other examples where, yes, there is a role potentially for the communities to play. One of the other reports that Audit Wales have produced looks at social enterprises, for instance, having a role in the local areas and local communities to help take that burden and to put more of that support in place in local areas. So there's lots of different ways in which I think we can all play a part in that. And I think this report particularly focuses on where those communities have the opportunity to respond for themselves to their own challenges. Just as one example, our team was supporting the Marston gas explosion incident a few months back, and it was a good example where we came in as a local authority to provide support, and we had a community hub, and we were on hand throughout that crisis. You know, the local area coordinators were there, but it was great to see that the communities themselves really pulled together. Local organizations and businesses were supporting each other, like the rugby club and things like that. So that's an example where in a sort of an emergency situation, the community was resilient and they did respond to that situation. I guess what the report really does is gives us the opportunity to look at where we can help with that and where we can enable some of that with the things we do and the things we can put in place. And then just the only other thing I wanted to mention, just in response to the comment, I think Alison was absolutely right. You know, all of the teams play a part. So really, this is about collaboration and making sure that we've all got a role to play. So, you know, co-production is really important to this approach going forward. We want to make sure that communities and community leaders and others have a voice and are able to be a part of the decision-making process as well. So it all kind of does link in together. But it's really important that this evaluation gives us the opportunity to review where we are and identify the actions that we can take place to take that forward. So that was it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Tony, do you want to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to be devil's advocate for a bit, if that's okay. The first reaction I had to this was, what on earth is an audit group based mainly on finance trying to re-engineer the way that communities operate? Because as soon as an accountant puts out a plan to do something in the current climate, they are accused of saving money rather than improving the services. Now, I wonder if you could tell me whether the audit committee or the audit service or whatever it's branded as at the moment, whether it's got any social scientists on it, members of it, and whether it's got any experts in network theory. And I'll pause there and let you respond. Then I'll, if I may, on my.
No, and certainly I can answer in terms of the role that the Governance and Audit Committee have in this is basically to make sure that in terms of the recommendations that are put forward by the Auditor General, that we as an organisation are taking forward those organisations and we're following the right protocols to take those recommendations forward. So they're not effectively assessing the detail of what we're proposing. They're making sure we're following the rules and the processes to make it a consistent process for how audits are done. It's not auditing the Tackling Poverty Service or any of the actions that we're taking. It's just making sure that we are complying with the reporting guidelines that are put forward. I'm not a member of the Governance and Audit Committee, but I know we've taken a previous reports to them before just to tell them this is what we're doing, this is how we're following the rules, and this is what we'll report to you to make sure it's very clear what we're doing. In terms of the detail though, that's all part of the work we're doing, so all of the actions will be part of the community groups, and we will be reporting through the internal governance rather than the Governance and Audit Committee per se.
Thank you, Lee. I think Hayley wants to come in, yeah?
Yeah, it was more on the last point that I think that's why they're asking us to self-evaluate rather than evaluating our work. And I think it's really important to recognise that our communities are very different. We might all be in Swansea, but the demographic of our communities are very unique. And that's why having those leaders based within those communities, it's really crucial, because you have to know the needs of the communities that whether you're representing or you're volunteering in. We were in meetings this morning actually looking at a particular project, and I think a common theme that was coming out of that, and I think Alison will back me up, is that when you are coming together and you're looking at a project and you are volunteering, you have to have the buy-in from the people that those needs are going to be met, otherwise they're not going to engage, they're not going to buy into what we are saying is doing to. It needs to be doing with, enabling, and that's why this approach is going to be key moving forward, because it has to be co-produced. We need to be speaking to as many people as possible, the key stakeholders, but most importantly, the people that are impacted by the decisions that we make in.
Thank you, Hayley. Jeff, you've got your hand up. Is that you want to come back?
It's such an interesting, what Hayley actually.
Hold on a second. I just wanted to check if it was your hand. Tony is still asking questions. You'll come in after Tony.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. There was some work done in the University of Glamorgan some years ago about resilient communities. And what it found was that there were a number of resilient communities in the catchment area. The problem was they were resilient for doing things that we wouldn't approve of. And I think you have to find a way of, first of all, understanding what that community's cachet is, if you like, and what it consists of. If it's got a lot of senior people with business experience and have lived life experience, that's fine. If it's got a very different cohort of individuals whose life experiences haven't been so good, then that's not necessarily a good thing. Out of that came some of the suggestions for what's known as network theory. And have you come across network theory? No. What network theory sets out to do, and again, there's some work done in the University of Glamorgan on this, was to try and explain what particular networks they're for doing. So, for example, you might have a group of different interests coming together in a network to plan something ahead for 5 years because it needed the different skills of the different clients. That's one sort of network. You could have a production network, and you could have a network that is there for producing not only things that are already produced, but for being able to produce things that are yet to come. Now, they don't need to be physical things. For example, if you have a network running a health and care system in a location, then you'd expect that network to operate with a mix of professionals who've got different skills, in an ideal world are co-located, in an ideal world are co-educated and re-educated and reinforced and replenished, and they monitor and change the plans and the delivery models in light of current good best practice or coming best practice. And I'm going to be very blunt about this. I think that any financial department that is proposing to be responsible for or guide the development of what effectively are different what I think will be different networks within the city and county because of the different populations and the different places where industry is and where poverty is and so on. I think we would be wise to get an expert who understands network working and the rules of the game and the training that comes with it. Because I think it's a fascinating. I mean, I'm very pleased that we're going down this road, but of course, as someone said earlier, the different communities have got very different needs and at different styles, times of their development, and of course, poverty sits in a relatively few number of communities, but they're probably big communities. I'll stop there, Chair. I think I've found that.
I don't think there was a question in that.
And just to say, yeah, I totally take the comment on board. I think you're absolutely right. The network element is going to be part of the approaches, or one of the approaches we could definitely look at. So yeah, we'll take that feedback on board and take that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Jeff, do you want to ask a question now?
Yeah, what Tony quite eloquently actually said. Now, perhaps I didn't put it forward so clear when I started and so on. And I think Hayley actually touched on it as well. You're actually talking about empowering people in communities to, take this role on. You need people really to, well, at the end, they've got to come up with the goods. Otherwise, people won't trust them anyway. But I was trying to say, well, who is going to choose these people? How are you going to control these people? It worries me really with, the start of the, the paper where it actually says that the report looks at the priority placed on community resilience and self-reliance in local authority plans and how local authority are equipping people to be less reliant on overstretched, authorities services. The report concludes that local authority face a challenging and uncertain financial future, but find it difficult to empower people and communities to be more self-reliant. So really, you're getting people to take on a role. As I said, it's like another workforce really to carry this work on. We're actually saying that things are going to be tight. And well, basically, really, people are going to have to do more for themselves at the end of the day. It's just the control factor, how this is going to be driven forward, that concerns me.
I don't. Yes.
Sorry, Claire. Yeah, and just to reassure, basically, yeah, I mean, I totally accept that this is an area we're investigating now in terms of how best to take this forward with communities. This isn't a case of the local authority wanting to go in and like we say, doing two, as Sadie said. So, part of the co-production approach we're taking, part of that engagement is to work out how best that would fit with communities, where their strengths are, where the assets they can use are already in place, that we could, see them, almost wanting to come forward. So it's not a case of employing them as such as a workforce or saying that there is a particular thing, but it's about seeing, as we did with the COVID pandemic, the natural community response to step up, help their neighbours, to be there, to be self-reliant in the case of looking after each other. And I think it's about tapping into that as opposed to controlling that. But I think all of these considerations need to be part of our discussions going forward, so that we don't go down a path that we're not intended to do, or that the Audit Wales report is not suggesting that we should go down. So all factors to be considered, definitely.
Thank you. No more questions. I've got a question for you. When are you going to do an audit for each of the wards? Because there are things that are happening out there that nobody realises happening within each of the wards. And the ward councillors, I haven't been consulted on anything to know what's happening in my ward.
I mean, I'm sure I can come back to that in the sense of, a lot of the work we're doing now with the refreshes, the tackling poverty strategy, with the Audit Wales, all of the Audit Wales reports now starting to give us real opportunities to evaluate and map and understand where we are as an organisation. So it's kind of like an opportunity for us to baseline our knowledge and our information at this point. We've talked before about the importance of roles like the local area coordinators, because they've got a real foothold in the communities and they know what's going on, and that knowledge is there for us to tap into. So we've got a real chance to do that at the ward level, but also to present that back in terms of looking at it from a broader perspective, looking at the common issues that are being faced or the barriers that are consistent to communities that aren't locality based. They may be sort of like communities based on protected characteristics and things like that. So we're putting all of that together. I think the strategy will give us the priorities and the themes for us to take that work forward. And I'm hoping that when we get to the point that we can publish that and take forward action planning on the back of that, we'll be able to target some of those activities and really help people in local areas in places like this.
Good.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Following on from what you've said, I mean, in terms of the experiences that might suddenly afflict particular communities. So, for example, if the steelworks closes in Neath, the problems won't be confined to Neath because there'll be Swansea people who work there. If retail industries shut down, as is happening, as we read about various stores closing, that will impact differently on different communities. How can we build into the planning for this approach the machinery that has its antennae tuned to what could happen or what is likely to happen that will affect this particular community because it's rooted there, or that particular community because a large number of people work in that sector? I mean, I know we're asking for foresight and forecasting, but I think that capability, crude though it may have to be, is an important element of the anticipatory approach to building the networks. So I just offer that as a thought.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
Just a question, how do you define a community? Because obviously, as councillors, we work in wards. Is that one community or whole one, or are there various communities within that, or which way do you kind of look at, how would you identify? And then how would you work with the leaders of those communities that are already in place, is what it amounts to, because you would need to identify them as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, very happy to answer that one. Yeah, it's part of the definition work that I think we need to do very carefully and very in a coordinated way with the communities. You're absolutely right. Like, for instance, our local area coordination network has a footprint of 23 sort of like areas, if I can call them that. And obviously some of them have multiple wards in their areas. Others, some of our local area coordinators work on, as I said, sort of communities from a different perspective in terms of protected characteristics and things like that. So we're able to look on a bigger footprint, if you like, but at a cohort that is perhaps a bit more, you know, in terms of their interests and shared characteristics. So there's a lot of elements to that. You're absolutely right. But by doing that with the communities, I think we'll be able to come up with the definitions that allow us to manage our services and our approaches in the right way. Cool.
Julie, thank you. Councillor Holly, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple of questions really. To take in what has been said earlier on, how do you define the community? That definition Lee is describing, and the one that was described earlier on by like a steel community or something of that nature, you can't really define that until you want to do something within that organization or within that community, because it could be that it's a collection of wards, it could be a street in a ward, it could be an encampment, it could be anything, it could be an industry, as was pointed out by Tony. So I'm not sure you can define that until you actually say you want to help, I don't know, a certain estate or something of that nature. So I think that's going to be quite a difficult ask. And it's not just a difficult ask, but you could argue that the community is the whole of Swansea. So it's not a tangible thing, then, put it that way. It's something that's going to be worked through when people need help. You talked about Morriston earlier on. That was a specific area within the ward of Morriston. So, that again, it's a difficult one, because you do get people that come and help from outside of Morriston. So it's a difficult one. The other thing I want to ask Lee really about is, how long is this going to take? You say about do the definitions and what have you, and the programs and what have you, but how long is it going to take?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the timescales in terms of the work we're doing now to engage with communities to ask these questions, to come up with some of the definition work. We're tying it all in with the publication of the refresh of the Tackling Poverty strategy. So there's a lot of overlap in terms of the prioritisation and the themes and the work that we're doing. Our current plan timescale for that is to go out to public consultation with a draft of that towards the end of this calendar year. So we're hoping October, November time. That gives us the opportunity then over the next couple of months to take all these reports, to take all of the analysis that we've done in terms of the research, the desktop analysis and so on, and to take all of the engagement activities that we're doing and pull it all together and use it as the basis for putting something that we can take out to consultation initially. But I think, and again, going back to your first point, Councillor, you're absolutely right. It's not you pin it down once and that's it. It's defined. It's going to change. It's going to shape as you go along, and we're going to need to make sure that our processes and our services are aligned and agile enough to respond in those situations. So part of the challenge isn't just to write a document, publish it, and go, there we are. That's what we're doing. It's about making sure that we've got the right behaviours and we've got the right mindset in our services to make sure we're responsive to those challenges as well. So those are the sort of the timescales to take on some of these challenges in terms of responding to audit reports and things like that. But in terms of, it's an ongoing challenge challenge for our service and a lot of the teams that are working on this tackling poverty agenda.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Alison, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. So I was just going to say, you know, Chris is right. We talk about community and community being the whole of Swansea, do you know what I mean? But within that, there are just so many communities, do you know what I mean? Hayley and I were with Castle Ward this morning, you know, and if you take that ward, it's a large ward, but they're very different areas in there. The Sandfield's got a community of his own, you know, compared to, you know, there's different. I just say it can be like, if I take my ward, you know, you could say each village is a community, but then within Birchgrove, the main road separates, and they become two different communities because they won't go to the park on the other side of the roads. Do you know what I mean? You know, so I think we got all range of communities, and like we said, we got minority communities, and we got all. It's a very broad way, isn't it? But it does break down into lots, and I'm sure as councillors we got lots of communities within our wards. Do you know what I mean? So, but as Lee said, we are on a timescale to, you know, by the end of the year now, to have refreshed the poverty strategy and everything, and no, you know, it isn't easy, but what I can say, over the last 5 years, we've really developed those partnerships, those forums, well, third sector compact agreement. You know, I joint chair it with director of SCVS. You know, and I think we're in a really strong place now of working together to achieve these things, because they're not easy, and you know, it does come with its complexities, but all councillors I would encourage to really sort of get to know the local area coordinators, because they have done mapping exercises of the wards, of their areas. They do know what's going on, you know. So and for many of us, we've been around a long time in our own areas. We also know lots of things that's going on, so we can all work together. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Alison. Okay. No more questions. We'll go on to item 7 now, tackling poverty service grants.
That's me again, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay. Poverty grants have become literally lifelines for people. The report shows a list of grants which worth over £500,000, and we've just had £250,000 added onto that for the holiday hunger. You know, but what we do know, and we've mentioned this already, you know, is that this small amount of money in the right hands, in the third sector, can go a long way. We always have an application process to assess how the money can make positive impacts on the lives of people. The team have developed good working relationships with the third sector and are embedded in the fight against poverty. Partnership working is vital, and some feedback I had last week from Clydach's Men's Shed was about the grants they received, and that have enabled them to grow. And the Warm Spaces one that went out in the winter, they said actually saved lives. In fact, they said that our officers will never fully know the impact they have on people. They said we can't thank them enough. And I'd like to second this and to say thank you. You know, the last 2 weeks have been a classic example of how, when met with a massive challenge of being told there would be no free school meals this summer, you know, we had this huge pressure of how can we ensure children, you know, are fed. And the officers, they grouped together, they got on with it. Not once did they say, we can't do it, it's not achievable. They worked through it, and they have gone out like I can't describe. I'm so proud of how, and all our partners out there that have rallied round and said, absolutely, we're going to do everything that we can, you know, for this to be achieved. And as you read through, you'll see, you know, how many of the grants have just helped so many people. We don't try to trip people up. We don't make it complicated for them to apply. You know, because it's very difficult when you got to go through some grants, as we all know. You know, you you give up straight away because they're too complex. But there are huge differences, you know, and we're very fortunate. Even our library services, when I think back to when I was a child and being told to be quiet in the libraries, do you know what I mean? Now are helping young girls with period products. You know, making the difference is just enormous. So the report is sort of self-explanatory in that, and I'm sure the officers will go through it. But as you can see, what we've achieved with not a huge amount of money, I think, is amazing.
Thank you, Alison. Over to you, Lee, and to
Anthony. Hi, everyone.
Anthony. I've forgotten your name, sorry.
That's fine. Good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't met me or don't know me, my name's Anthony Richards, and I'm the Tackling Poverty Development Manager. I sit within the Tackling Poverty Service under Lee, and we've got a small team. And one of the things that we do, as well as what Alison has kind of talked about, and Hayley, in terms of kind of supporting that partnership relationships in Swansea, is that we handle a number of grants annually that are helping to tackle poverty, the impact of poverty in Swansea. And this report really highlights, the aim of the report was to kind of highlight the difference that funding is making. And this report covers the time period, the financial year 22-23. I appreciate Alison's talking about some of the pressures that we're currently under, and I'm really pleased that we're able to make a difference this summer, but that's not included within this report.
Do you want to share that report on screen for people to, or are you quite happy just to?
I'm quite happy to give the overview. I think what I'd like to say kind of echoes again what Alison said here, you know, to really understand the difference that funding is making. It's about hearing from the organisations, the recipients of that grant funding. As an officer, I'm equipped to give you the kind of highlights of that, but what we tried to bring out in the report there is the main body of the report does cover the voice of the organisations, describing the difference it's made to them as the organisation, what ability that funding gives them in terms of making a difference, and the difference it's making for the individuals and households that they are supporting. So a bit of context, I'm sure I don't need to talk about the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic had, about low-income households that were disproportionately impacted, and now of course we're all familiar with the term cost of living crisis, which followed on. So I'm not going to talk about that, but that gives a bit of context to the fact that the last financial year saw quite a significant increase in the number of grants and the amount of grant funding that the team was handling to tackle poverty and support people that were feeling the impact of the current economic situation. As Alison said, in 2022, it's over £500,000 amount of funding that was awarded through the Tackling Poverty Development team. There were a total of 263 individual successful applications that were processed, and 132 unique organisations accessed that funding within Swansea. And that could be organisations from the third sector, it could be community groups, it could be services within the local authority, libraries has been mentioned as one example. Also last year we did, is in the report, we did, the team were involved in part of the cost of living funding from Welsh Government, the discretionary element. So we had a proportion of funding to support people with energy payments. So that was a new challenge for the team, and that was actually direct payments to individuals. In the whole, these grants that were supporting organisations across Swansea, community groups, council services, to deliver, to work together and to make a difference to individuals. So the report talks about, I'll name the grants that are in the report. There's the Household Support Grant and the Direct Food Support Grant. Now, both of those grants are about tackling food poverty and food insecurity. So many of the organisations in Swansea that are working around that, so the network of food banks, the community food growing projects can access that funding to support their activity. And of course, you can imagine the demand of food banks during the COVID-19 pandemic and now the cost of living crisis. We also had funding to continue the work in Swansea establishing a sustainable food partnership. That actually sits with the Environment Centre, and our food partnership in Swansea is called Boyd Abertawe. That work had already started, but that funding is certainly helping the development of that partnership. We also handled the communities element of the period dignity grant. So every local authority in Wales receives a period dignity grant. It's shared between education, so that helps put in products into schools, and then the Tackling Poverty Development team handle the period dignity and communities element of the grant there, again making that funding available to organisations, community groups to access that funding, making products available for people, and reducing the stigma around period dignity. We also had, again, this kind of represents the challenges that Swansea and other local authorities were facing as we entered last winter. A new grant from Welsh Government, whether it'll be repeated again this year, unclear at the moment, but the Warm Hubs grant that came with quite short notice, really. It was actually November before we had the grant offer. So it was very little time to kind of put together a plan, get that funding out and establish a network of warm hubs across Swansea, which we call Swansea Spaces. I think the other grant then to mention, and again, Alison did mention this, the Men's Shed grant, which is supporting existing and developing men's sheds projects across Swansea. So that one continuing. The largest proportion within the report, you'll see there's a graph that kind of breaks down the proportions of funding, and I just wanted to highlight really that the largest proportion of that £500,000 is focused on tackling food poverty and food insecurity. Really, I do urge all members of the panel here to read the report, because it's not me talking about the report that is going to get across the difference it's made. It is those quotes from the organisations that are telling the story about what that funding has enabled them to do. So with each grant in the report, you'll see that those quotes have been brought together to explain the difference the grant made to the organisation, the difference the grant made for the individuals, and feedback on the grant process that we put together, so that we can learn and improve our processes for future years. And this information was collated through the monitoring processes within the grant. So looking back at, as I said, last financial year, what probably doesn't come across in the report so much that I thought I'd mention is that the Tackling Poverty Development team not only administers the process of those grants, but where possible, we co-design those processes with the organisations that are stakeholders, to make sure that we're getting it right, to make sure that it's accessible. We try to tailor the kind of criteria of the grant, the focus of the grant, so that we're bending it in a positive way to meet local needs. And the team are on hand to provide ongoing support, not just through the application process, but through the delivery process of those grants through to the monitoring and closing. And I think I'd like to mention I mentioned the Warm Hubs grant, and I think that's actually a good example where that highlights where the team not only administer the grant, but develop new schemes to kind of maximise the impact of that funding. So the example would be that, you know, we did create a Swansea Spaces directory, which is on Swansea Council's website. All of those spaces were listed there during the winter. And actually, it's a testimony to the success of those activities that there are still over 60 spaces listed on that directory that wanted to continue with that activity, even though the funding had come to an end. I think that's probably a fair summary of the report and all I can add, but I would urge, you know, read some of those comments around the grants from the words of those organisations. That is what will tell you the story of the difference made.
Thank you, Anthony. Are there any questions for Anthony? Tony.
Sorry, is that on? Yes, it is on. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm just intrigued that we have a project called Men Sheds. I was just wondering what the female equivalent was.
Actually, I was at Clydach Men's Shed, and they now have a woman shed. So they, even though the men's shed is open to women, they actually have their own shed at the side of the men's shed, and they do their things that they had a sale on Friday where I bought a well for out the garden and stuff like, they were, and the women had made all these crafty things. It was fabulous. So so yes, Tony, they have got women's sheds as well now.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Anthony? No? Oh, sorry, Hayley.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question really, but a huge thank you. I know my ward in particular recently has applied for support through the summer to help feed children. And the speed that those grant applications were approved and distributed has been exceptional. And I know that it's going to support a lot of families in my ward through the summer. So I'd just like to put my thanks. Put on record my thanks. And also another comment. I know Alison touched upon it and many others around the room, but we've gone through austerity and COVID and cost of living crisis and fuel crisis and housing crisis, and people are really struggling at the moment. There's no two ways about it, and it's really unfortunate that food banks exist and that we need to be relying upon these grants, but that's the reality, and it is life-saving to a lot of people. I had the pleasure of visiting a lot of the Swansea Spaces organisations, and it was really heartwarming that these organisations and these volunteers are willing to step in and they want to do it. They want to support our communities. We are very fortunate that we've got these people living in our city who are willing to step forward and be real community leaders when they need it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. Okay, we'll go on to item 8, and I can see Amy has joined us. I don't know if you want to introduce with Richard.
Yeah, thank you. This was just to bring back some case studies. So in November, Richard gave an update to you on direct payments, and so yeah, I suppose I just want to hand straight over really for him to give a bit more context of the report. So we've given you 3 case studies. There's one we haven't conferred beforehand, so I might be repeating things. I don't wish to, but there was one that we shared via video link before the meeting, and I hope everyone's had a chance to look at that. It was only a 2-minute video, and please have reassurance. We definitely have consent to share the video, but we thought also fair to not publish it online either, because these are individuals and their circumstances. But hopefully, it really demonstrated to you the good use that direct payments are used for, and also there are 2 others as well. So I'll pass over to Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Richard.
Thanks, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, Richard Davis, Strategic Manager for the Direct Payment Support Team at Swansea. You've got sight to say of the reports, and I think they're pretty sort of explanatory of where we are, perhaps in answer to your initial questions. My presence here today is to answer any more questions that you may have around the service. Certainly, I can bring your attention to our Recruit Local campaign. That's been very positive. Some of the figures are quite startling, actually. We recognised last year that the sort of conveyor belt, for want of a better word, of direct payments was on hold because we simply didn't have the peer workforce to facilitate, to support that. So we put a lot of effort and had the fortune to recruit a very competent peer coordinator, and we've put the Recruit Local pilot in place, and it's proved very, very effective. To give you a sense of numbers, last year when I joined the department, we simply didn't have applications for peer advisor roles, or they were very few and far between. We've had 839 applications in since October, and we've actually placed near 100 personal assistants into roles. So it's backed really the national trend, and we've done that through fabulous teamwork. The team that we have in direct payments, they're brilliant. I'll be honest with you, they're so compassionate and so passionate about what they do.
and they've linked in brilliantly with community members, with other council teams, workways, local area coordinators, SCVS, the Carer Centre, and we touched on in early presentations, council leaders and council leaders and organisations within communities. And this partnership working, that's actually what's paying dividends. It's creating that buzz of excitement of there is something happening. And we've capitalised upon that buzz really with Swansea Council of Voluntary Services and our Micro Enterprise project to identify PAs who are grouped or perhaps living locally, who can support local people and can do it in a joined up way themselves. So creating a bit of a social enterprise, which gives a resilience then to the provision that they can offer to people.
That's good.
So it's been a really good success, and we're very pleased that, you know, a simple example is within the story of a young man who has got some physical difficulties, and to have an event that was perhaps central to Swansea would have been difficult for him to attend. By going out in the communities, by doing what we do across the county, it afforded him access to a place in Mansfield actually, where he was met by the PA coordinator, and that very day his advert went out, and he's now found someone who can work as his PA and assist him with mobility and transportation. And the difference that just makes on one person's life is huge and worth all the effort. So that was wonderful. Some of our work around pooling direct payments has started to come together now. So pooling direct payments are where a number of individuals receive direct payments and then, in simplistic terms, lump that money together for the benefit of all of them. This particular project has had some oversight from the Impact Project, which is a national project, and Swansea achieved more probably than can be expected in the project and is reported nationally. But this group of people, they're phenomenal individuals. I've met them many times in the Conveyor Club. You know, they've chosen the people who work for them. Now, if that isn't supporting voice, choice and control, I don't know what is. You know, so they need some support, and they've actually put the advert out themselves and chosen the people who work for them, and they are very much in control of their lives, in control of where they go, and in control of what happens to them. I think that's just a wonderful example of where direct payments can create empowerment. Aside from that, sorry, going off book a little bit, only a little bit. We've got some wider engagement, and that's certainly starting to pay some dividends as well. You know, engagement with CLICE, for example. You know, the new body set up to support citizens' voice, and they're going to be involved with us in the development of engagement. And Lee touched on that earlier. You know, co-production just doesn't sit with one office within the authority. It's right across the authority. For example, just a few weeks ago, we co-produced the appointment of the new advisor for the team. So people who receive direct payments sat in equity with interviewers from the council in equal numbers, at equal say, and an advisor was appointed. We went to see a group of people in Maggie's Cancer Centre just last week, made some good connections there, and we'll capitalise upon that to create direct line of communication between our team and Maggie's Cancer Centre, because my humble opinion is if you're undergoing something as horrific as cancer, or caring for someone undergoing something horrific as cancer, then you don't need to be struggling to find communication for the support that you need. So we'll open those communications up. Some of our work externally with Social Care Wales has been quite impactful. So, for example, our Recruit Local campaign, it's been successful and it's been noted nationally. So we've presented that to Social Care Wales and across Wales as sort of an exemplar model of how perhaps we can buck the national trend of the dire state of the social care workforce. And we are working in partnership, say, with other teams across council, particularly local area coordinators, because they do have the expertise on the ground, and we capitalise upon that wherever we can to either recruit or identify people who need support and work in a joined up way to get the right support to the right people at the right time.
Thank you, Richard.
Open for questions.
Thanks. Are there any questions? Tony?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quickies. First of all, I wonder if you could tell me what the budget is for direct payments in the current financial year. What proportion of that goes on paying personal assistance, human beings, as it were, and what proportion goes on buying services? For example, paying taxi drivers to get you from A to B if you have a problem.
Thank you, Tony. In response to that, I don't have the exact figures, but I can say the budget at the moment, or the spend at the moment, is between 5.8 and £6 million a year for direct payments. The bulk of that does go towards personal assistance and specialised provision, because certainly with child and family services, there's some specialised provisions that are quite large packages. Then I say support. In relation to buying transport, it does happen, but a lot of people think that they can use direct payment for transport, but they're already on PIP with a mobility element, and there is some conflict there because it's almost double payment in some ways of transport. So if someone receives personal independence payments with a mobility element, it isn't necessary that we would supply additional transport costs. That's not necessarily a given.
That makes sense.
Does that answer that question sufficiently?
It does, Chair, but I mean, I think there are one or two vulnerable individuals whose medical conditions are such that it's unlikely that they can travel outside alone. And if one option is that you employ your PA to be with you all the time that you are out doing shopping or whatever, or even longer duties, as opposed to having a relationship with a trusted taxi firm or taxi driver, then probably the latter would be cheaper than employing the former. And I just wondered if what the numbers of people in that category might be.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand your question. At the moment, we've got PAs who actually drive people, so we support them that way. As I say, if it comes down to the actual transport and there's a mobility element, I still sit with the first answer of, if there's a mobility element that allows for the purchase of the relationship with perhaps a taxi company, and that would be a fair use of personal independent payment mobility element. Every direct payment comes as a result of an assessment of the social worker. There is a huge variation in the care and support that can be assessed and delivered or afforded, and that comes down to individual assessment. So you're right, if people are in dire circumstances, even down to the rates that we pay for personal assistance, for example, there's flexibility within that if there is no viable means to meet the assessed need. So it's hard to give definitive answers, but I would say that direct payments is a hugely flexible way of meeting assessed need. An awful lot of it is based on the actual assessment by the qualified practitioner, and then we as a team try and support the individual to meet their needs via the money that they have. And of course, with a direct payment, it's more than a time and task exercise. It's very much about what does suit the individual. So if someone, for example, is receiving, say, 10 hours a week, but for a fortnight, a family member comes to stay and they don't need that 10 hours a week, then they can build that money up and use it in a way to meet their assessed needs at another time. And that flexibility can sometimes then pay for additional things like excursions, like specialist transportation support, like support to go to something that meets, again, their assessed needs and supports their wellbeing outcomes. Does that assist?
It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Richard? Jeff, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, yes, Amy, I did look at the video, and I must admit it opened my eyes. Perhaps I had a bit of a narrow outlook on direct payments, and great they could use it, for family members. So I thought that was a big plus. But on similar lines as Tony, Richard, You know, I know there's a push really for people to actually, shall we say, use direct payments. I can remember a time where it perhaps wasn't pushed, you know, so much and so on. But I know Tony actually used a taxi driver and so on. But have we got a breakdown of the monies, shall we say, that come back to the local authority through our services, as opposed to actually goes outside the local authority? You said there's a budget there, but how much of that budget comes back as such through our services?
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Amy.
Shall I come back on that one? So if someone's using a very quick answer or a sweeping statement answer, but if someone's using direct payments, it will all be for external services. So if they were using an internal service, that would be under a different assessed need. That would be fair to say, wouldn't it? Yeah. So people are only using that budget to spend on other services, whether that's a personal assistant, whether that's to buy into a independent care provider. You know, so that's so in terms of the splits of budget, I might have to come back to you with that information, but you know, because our overall budget for adult services is over 100 million. So I think it's probably fair to say it's 5.6 of over 100 million, you know, so yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Paxton, you've got a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Direct payments obviously been around for a long time, and my understanding is that by and large they're there for people to determine and make sure that they get the services they want for themselves in terms of domiciliary care, etc. And I also understood as well that Welsh Government has been pushing as far as possible to get the level of direct payments increased. Now I'm not quite sure why that is, whether they think it gives people more control or over their own lives or what, I'm not quite sure. But having said that, and having seen the video today, which obviously provided a very good example of the use of direct payments, how on earth do you monitor that, and how do you stop payments or direct payments not being used for the right purpose or being used for the wrong purpose, then, as far as we would be concerned?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You're right. I mean, I think historically direct payments has been utilised largely for the purchase of PA support. Direct payments is far more expansive than that. It's as expansive as the imagination would allow. And any opportunity to use a direct payment where it increases individual resilience, reduces reliance on services, leads to either volunteering, education, or employment, is a valid use of direct payments. And in relation to how we monitor it, every spend is closely monitored. We've either got managed accounts, which is currently managed by Compass Disability Services, or all pay cards, and they are managed by a finance team who at any time can look at these cards to see what the expenditure is made on. Every spend has to go via either our team, a social worker, or the finance team, to be agreed as in line with assessed need. So somebody couldn't simply just have a direct payment, pool the money, and then go and buy a holiday. That couldn't be done. So there is oversight on it. If there are any irregularities, the council has the authority to recover the monies and to close the accounts down. We have oversight, to say, particularly of all pay cards, and can shut them down immediately if necessary. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? Can I ask a question for clarification? If somebody attends a day service for maybe 2 days a week, their allocation, can they pay direct payments then for having an additional day in one of our services?
It would depend on their assessed need. So if their assessed need was for more than the 2 days, once an assessment's been undertaken, what is termed as a package of care is accepted that this will meet the need of that person.
Right.
If they go via a direct payment, well, of course, it's very much down to the person's choice then what they do. And what part of the work we do as a direct payment team now is to try and expand that choice. So
Right.
so it isn't a choice if you can only choose one thing.
Yeah.
Then what's the point in going down a direct payment? So part of our work behind the scenes is to expand that choice, to look at what day provision is available, support providers alongside our local aid coordination colleagues to develop services within communities. And then when someone receives the money, they've got a raft of choice to meet their needs. So if they were given a provision of 2 days of support, and that arguably met their need, they possibly wouldn't be entitled to direct payment on top of that.
Okay.
But then
Okay,
they could
good,
be.
thank you.
We're looking more and more now to split, for want of a better word, packages. So, you know, if there's an element of support that can be met internally by something that we already provide, but an element then could be met externally, we're looking again, right service, right time, the right person. An element of the whole package would be internal support, and then an element of it would be perhaps to employ a PA or to attend something that is external to us.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you. Are there any other questions? I think that concludes the meeting. On to item 9, the work programme. Yeah. Are there any queries on that? Just something that Richard said earlier about Llais. Community health councils have gone over to Llais. Is there a way that we can put that into our programme and to have an understanding on the new organisation of Llais? Great.
We can certainly ask them, yeah, if they'll come along and speak, or we can tell you what we're doing as an authority in terms of responding to Llais. But yeah, I'm sure that we can.
I'm sure there's
if
going
any
to be a
invite.
video. I was on a meeting virtually with them, and I'm sure they mentioned that there was going to be some video to explain what they're trying to do. Yeah, great. Thank you. And with that, close the meeting. Thank you all for attending. Really interesting meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thanks, Sue.
Bye.
Bye all.